Thanks for joining us here today, guys. We're going to be doing another Lorehammer video. This time we'll be covering Dark Elves. I know a lot of you guys have requested that, so I really wanted to get it out ASAP for you. Thanks for a lot of the positive feedback and assistance in the Skaven video so far. A lot of you guys have been giving me breakdowns on how to pronounce certain words, especially the Clan Scryer. Which I hope I just got right there. If I didn't, please let me know. But like I've said before, one of the fun and funny things about doing all of these lore videos, especially for fantasy universes, is you read all these names and you read them in your head. And in your head you pronounce them a certain way. When you finally say them out loud, it's totally skewed from the way that a lot of people do it. And I always like to hear the way you guys like to pronounce things, because I do want to kind of stay in line with what the community has in mind for the pronunciation for a lot of these things, with the Dark Elves and the Lizardmen and the High Elves and the Skaven, because they all have really unique ways of spelling and saying things, and it's very interesting. So again, I want to make sure I stick with that. So we'll be following the same kind of format that we have in previous videos. I'll be covering the Lords/Heroes of the Dark Elves, go into the core choices, some of the special and the rare, and follow it up with the legendary lords that I both know, and one of them being Malekith, and suspect that one of them being Morathi, which would just make sense to me. But we'll jump in here with the Lords and Heroes and go from there. And secondly, guys, if you do, I'm thinking of doing a video on all of the new lores that are coming out with Warhammer, Total Warhammer 2. I always like to butcher that name, but the High Lore of the High Elves, the Dark Lore of the Dark Elves, and the Plague and Ruin lores of the Skaven, which you guys have set me right on that. I didn't realize that that's what the name of the lores were. Skaven's lores are Plague and Ruin. If you would like to see that video, let me know. I'm kind of on the fence about it. I don't know if it's something you guys are definitely jonesing for, or that you want to kind of wait to see in the game. So I can at least give you a general idea of what they're like in the tabletop and what you should be expecting in Total War Warhammer 2. But let's just get on going. Starting off big with the Tyrants of Nagaroth. And again, the Lords and the Heroes of the Dark Elves. Dreadlords and Masters are the so-called noble-born rulers of Nagaroth. They range from sycophantic schemers to masterful strategists who have waged war across 100 battlefields. Though all such nobles pursue their own unique enthusiasms and ambitions, they are without exception selfish individuals, possessed of an arrogance matched only by their martial prowess, honed over centuries of unceasing war. Dark Elf commanders seldom lead through personal example, preferring to rely on bloodshed and intimidation. In Nagaroth, respect counts for nothing unless it is backed by fear. Amongst the lower-born Dark Elves, it is thought better to die at the hands of an enemy than to face the wrath of a disappointed Dark Elf lord. The enemy, at least, will grant a swift death, and have little prospect of making your family pay a bloody price for the failure of their kin. Dark Elves are sustained by the misery they inflict upon others, and noble-born offspring have no special protection. Those that manage to survive to adulthood are sent on a year-long raiding expedition. Dark Elves abhor weakness of any sort, so those youths that fail to make their mark during this time do not endure long thereafter. Some are slain by ambitious rivals. Others are murdered by their own families, who can neither tolerate nor risk a weakling's presence. Should the stripling acquit himself well during this rite of passage, he begins his ascent through Nagarothi society. However, this is a ladder with very greasy rungs, and more nobles perish in the climb than ever reach the heady heights of becoming a dreadlord. To alleviate the understandable paranoia engendered by the Dark Elves' treacherous society, a rigid code of etiquette has evolved. The low-born classes may not approach within 3 sword lengths of a noble without being summoned. A retainer may stand as close as 2 sword lengths, while a trusted retainer, such as a bodyguard, may stand just outsword a single sword's length. The closest, most intimate space is reserved for lovers, playthings, and mortal foes, the latter being far more trustworthy within reach than not. Many dreadlords owe their positions of power to their bloodlines, daring exploits, or the Witch King's mercurial favors. Others are granted temporary power by means of a writ of iron, an edict granted by one of the 6 rulers of the great cities of Nagaroth. He who bears a writ of iron shares the sponsor's authority, a powerful tool for the ambitious. However, should a Dark Elf fail in his appointed task, or show cowardice whilst acting in his sponsor's name, the writ is melted down and molten remains poured down his throat. Such is the price of failure in Nagaroth. So I really love, like, immediately when you get a really good feel for Dark Elf society by the fact that they measure the distance from one individual to another rather than saying personal space or a bubble. They say sword lengths. Holy shit. So you have a real good idea for the ruthlessness that's implied in the Dark Elf society, especially from the Highborns to the Lowborns. And I mean, obviously that's not going to make a huge translation into the into Total War Warhammer, but it's just going to be awesome that you're going to be playing a pretty sadistic and pretty ruthless race of elves. I mean, with the Wood Elves you have very vengeful and very nature-bound Wood Elves, a very archetypical Wood Elf of, say, Lord of the Rings. But in the High Elves you have the haughty kind of arrogance of the we know everything type of personality. But then of the Dark Elves you have a very dark and brooding and again ruthless personality, which is really going to be awesome to see how they kind of color the world of Nagaroth with these amazing units. In the Tyrants, the Dreadlord and the Master are very similar to the nobles and princes of the Dark Elves, or I'm sorry, the High Elves. The big difference is that they have a little bit more options. I guess that's always been the big difference between the High Elves and the Dark Elves in the tabletop. The Dark Elves have always had better options for magic items, for their mounts, because they can mount manticores, they can mount dark dragons. So they've cold ones, horses. They've just got a lot more to them. So that allows for a much more diverse lore, I guess you could say. And a lot of their magic items are, again, pretty beastly. One of the cool things I wanted to go into before I jump too much further into the Dark Elf lore is that they've got a race-wide ability called Murderous Prowess. Just to give you, it's a one sentence here. Models with this special rule, but not their mounts, reroll all to wound rolls of a 1 when making close combat attacks. If you've not played the tabletop, that means very little, but it's basically saying that they're so good at killing that they get to attack again if they fuck up killing. Basically. So they've got to really whiff to roll again. So I want to see if they incorporate this some way somehow into Total War Warhammer. I'd love to see maybe some sort of mechanic where they maybe have an added melee attack benefit under certain circumstances. Not sure what that would be. Maybe on the charge. I don't know, but it'd be really cool to see something like that. And another rule they've got is Eternal Hatred. And that's what a lot of people in the tabletop would say mainly separates what makes Dark Elves just a little bit better than the High Elves is that Eternal Hatred special rule, because it gives all of the Dark Elves hatred to High Elves. So if you're fighting against High Elves, which is like one of the other Dark Elves and High Elves are the top tier armies from tabletop. So I'm curious to see if they incorporate that into the actual game in some way or another. Like maybe if they're fighting against High Elves, maybe through an actual research tree or an actual Lord trait, they get maybe a better leadership or maybe more attack or more weapon strength when fighting against them, just like a lot of other races do. Like you can choose them in the Bretonnians to get better benefits against certain races under certain circumstances. But again, so the Dreadlord and the Master, which Dreadlord being the Lord choice, the Master being the hero, and I would see the Dreadlord being the the stereotypical general lore that you could select for the Dark Elves, and the Master being maybe one of the just kind of like an Empire Captain being one of the other selections you could have as a hero choice for the Dark Elves. And like I was saying, they mirror very much the dynamic of the High Elf Lord itself. But we've got the Warrior Lord down, the Dark Elf, the Dreadlord, and the Master. We should probably now go into the Supreme Sorceress, or the Sorceresses. So the Supreme Sorceress and the Sorceress. Elves have a natural affinity for the shifting winds of magic. In the ancient days, they learnt the secrets of manipulating this mystical power from the Slann, the most powerful servants of the Old Ones. Just as a quick side note, the Slann are the big frog dudes that we saw in the trailer of Total War Warhammer 2. That big Lord Mazamundi who just just kind of made that Wookiee noise going on. Yet, for all their expertise, there was always a limit to the amount of power the elves could harness. The risk of madness and spiritual corruption prevented them from delving deeper into the powers of chaos. It was Morathi who first ventured into this forbidden territory. Through dark rituals and bloody sacrifices, she molded the energies of chaos to her bidding. With this sorcery, the unrefined power of magic, Morathi soon began to weave enchantments and spells whose raw power far outstripped anything the elves had previously known. To this day, dark elves study the sorcerous arts, utterly seduced by the unrestrained energy it allows them to command. Chief among the magic wielders of Nagaroth are the Sisters of the Dark Covenant of the Sorceresses, who are gathered in the great fortress of Grond. Competition for positions in the Dark Covenant is bloody and fierce. Those that survive their sisters' ambitions learn some of the most powerful magic in the world. They can call upon ancient demonic entities to devour their enemies, hurl storms of wicked shards at their foes, or engulf them in dark energy. Though dark elves of both genders are capable of mastering the art of dark magic, male sorcerers are regarded with disdain, fear, and suspicion, a situation only exacerbated by the generous bounties Malekith offers for such a being's severed head. The Witch King knows of the prophecy of demise, whose ancient stanzas foretell how a great warrior will one day be cast from his home by a sorcerer. Malekith, ever given to a cautious mindset in such matters, believes it is he to whom the prophecy refers, and he is determined to cheat that destiny, one severed head at a time. Nonetheless, there are still those who would rather risk the Witch King's wrath than incur a debt to the covenant of sorceresses, so some sorcerers yet survive. Sorcerers, like male sorcerers. Should a Dreadlord's need be great enough to secure aid from the Dark Covenant, however, he will find himself in proxy command of a magical mastery as well-rounded as it is ruthlessly wielded. The dark magics of sorcery are but one of the disciplines studied by the sorceresses of Grond, and they can call upon the lores of battle magic with just as much skill as the stiff-souled mages of Ulthuan. Enemies can be immolated by whirling firestorms, turned to crystals by swirling purple energies, torn limb from limb by elementals, blasted apart by lightning, or transmuted into solid gold. All the while, the sorceresses laughs while with wicked delight, her castings becoming wilder as the joy of battle overtakes her. Yet, no matter how absorbed she becomes in this destruction, the sorceress always has one eye on her pituitive employer, her mind ablaze with the possibilities of how she will exact payment if none is voluntarily forthcoming. Again, the sorceresses mirror the high mages and mages of the high elves, and the big difference being, of course, that there's both genders as mages in the high elf community, I guess you could call it. In the dark elf community, as you've seen, females are predominantly the casting, quote-unquote, cast of the Dark Elf Society. And in a lot of the books that you read, and in a lot of the... in fact, there's no male sorcerer models outside of Malekith. And all of the lore that you read, too, in any of the books, like William King's got a trilogy on the Blood of Anarion, which covers Teclis, Malekith, and Tyrion. But they mention explicitly in that book how much there's only female sorceresses. And a lot of the Dreadlords have these... It's hard to say affairs because the Dark Elf Society as a whole is extremely sexual. Like, just hardcore fucking all the time, which is just kind of a little weird to read about out of the blue, but also fits the ambiance of the Dark Elves. It's a very very pleasure-filled and very ruthless and gore-filled society. But the great thing, too, again, about the sorceresses that we will see is that they use the lore of dark magic and any of the 8 lores of magic. So you can choose one of those 8 lores that we've already seen in Total War Warhammer 1, or the new dark magic, which will probably be introduced alongside its counterpart, high magic, and again, eventually plague and ruin magic for the Skaven. So I'm really curious to see how they do this, because they're probably going to do a dynamic where you have a mage, and he has the choice of being, all those 8 lores, just like the Empire does, where they've got their amber, their jade, their gray, so on and so forth, wizards. And it's probably going to be the same thing with sorceresses and supreme sorceresses, where you get to be able to choose what that lore is. I would like to see something maybe a little less cluttered, because, you go to choose one of the lores, and you've got like all these damn wizards to choose from. Just give me one, let me press a button to then select his lore from maybe the level up screen. That'd be really cool to see. But again, getting a little ahead of myself in talking about it, something that's not even out yet. But the sorceresses are going to match pretty alongside with those, the High Elf Mage and Archmage. One of the nice thing, though, about the Sorceresses is the difference in mounts, because I believe, as I check here real quick, that the Sorceress can use a horse, be on foot, or I think a Dark Pegasus. And I believe that the Archmage can actually use a Pegasus as well. Let me check here. Yeah, so they can ride a Dark Steed, a Cold One, a Dark Pegasus, or a Manticore and a Black Dragon. You can also mount a dragon as a Archmage, but I do not think you can ride a Griffin. So that's a big difference, because the Manticore is a pretty beastly beast, as we'll see when we'll get to them much later in the book, because they have their own entry, and I don't want to jump ahead and cheat that entry. But so we're going to see a very similar dynamic to the High Elves. In fact, a lot of what we're going to see, and I just don't want to sound like a broken record with the Dark Elves, is we're going to see very similar units to the High Elves with just a little bit of a twist on it. Typically, the units themselves, as you can see, this is just a very scantily clad woman. And when you saw the Dark Elf Lord, you saw very pointed and jagged armor with blades on it and swooping helmets and everything. Less of an actual face visible and more covered, because that's the kind of overall look of the Dark Elves. A lot more brooding, a lot more sinister looking, and we'll see that copied, but with a slight change in rules from the High Elves. Like I was saying, you get that same kind of unit dynamic. But moving on to the Cainite Assassins, and I personally find these as one of my favorite units in the Dark Elves, just because assassin models are always so cool to me. But these will most definitely be the actual assassin units of the Dark Elves in their hero units. Assassins are masters of subtle and murderous magic, trained from infancy to be the chosen warriors of Cain. They move silently and with a precision that surpasses even the standards of the other elves. Blindfolded, an assassin can walk sure-footedly across the spears of an embattled phalanx, or strike a precise flurry of blows, so that each cut exploits a different weakness of armor or flesh. The cult of Cain hires out its assassins to the rulers of Nagaroth in exchange for sacrifices, wealth, and political favor. Though the price is high, the assassin's skills are such that there is a constant demand for their services. Many assassins ply their deadly trade in the Dark Elf cities, eliminating their employers' competitors and aiding in coups against the ruling families. Some are hired by admirals of black arts to train corsairs to sow terror amongst the targets of their raids. Assassins are also often employed to ensure loyalty amongst the Dreadlord's regiments. Such is an assassin's skill at mimicry and concealment that the troops he accompanies usually remain wholly ignorant of the infiltrator within their ranks. The uncertainty this causes helps to keep the rebellion to a minimum, for no Dark Elf can be absolutely certain with whom he is conspiring. Assassins are masters of using poison, and they can coat their weapons with a variety of toxins. Some are deadly, others paralyze or stupefy their victims. One scratch from some of these poisons is enough to send a man into agonizing paroxysms as his nerves burn, his heart explodes, or his bones crack and shatter. The assassins take great pleasure in the awful demises of their victims and can keep prisoners alive for many days. Often they can extract confessions and information from captives much more quickly than the crude tortures used by the Nagarothi interrogators. And that's something that's saying something, because all of like the Dark Elf creed and society is about, let's go on raids, let's capture slaves, and let's torture them, and then maybe make them slaves. But let's torture them first. That's like a big thing in the Dark Elf society, and you see that right here with the Cainite Assassins. And I'm really stoked to see how they do them in this, because like I was talking about with the Assassins for the Skaven, the Dark Elf ones can hide in a unit. So they can basically deploy with a unit. That unit goes and makes contact with another unit, model to model, and then boop, out pops that assassin. So you have this unsuspecting unit of spearmen charging for the enemy lord. Boom, out comes this assassin that's just looking to blitz him and stab him to death in the night. So, I mean, because if you look at the stats on these guys, they have like 9 weapon skill, which of course is hard to equate into Total War Warhammer if you don't understand the dynamic, but it means they have a very high melee attack. They're very likely to hit, and they would have more than likely a moderate to high weapon strength depending on how you probably use their poisons, because they do have poisoned attacks, and they have different types of poison. One of it helping pretty much to it gives the unit killing blows, so they can outright kill a model. That's not going to happen in Total War Warhammer, but I could see it maybe having a percentage chance to do a certain chunk of damage to them. Or maybe it's on a certain cooldown that it increases their armor piercing by a certain large amount, or the weapon strength by a certain large amount in addition to that. So I could definitely see that happening. And they've got, that one was called Dark Venom. They also have one called Manbane, which would more often than, because this increases the chance to wound, so it's probably going to increase their actual melee attack. And then, of course, the last one being Black Lotus, which would help demoralize a unit. So it's maybe a negative leadership role. So that would be very advantageous for, say, a Goblin War Boss, where you'd use Black Lotus and their leadership would drop and make it so they route quicker, and thus the whole army routing quicker. So there's definitely a lot of dynamics they can use with those poisons. I just see in general that unit, or that one hero, having poisoned attacks. So it'll be interesting to see again how they translate the poisoned attacks of the tabletop into Total War Warhammer, because nothing really has this level of what's called forbidden poisons. So it's really kind of cool to see that dynamic out there. We're rounding off here the actual lords and heroes. There are some more with the high Beastmasters. And the Beastmasters, I don't really see them being an actual lord, maybe a hero, but I'll read the little bird on them here, little spurt on them here, because it's very small, and I think you guys would like to just hear it. The Beastmasters of Klar Karand and Karan Kar can command even the unruliest creatures to do their bidding. In part, this mastery springs from their unflinching dedication to the Tormentor's craft, but brutality alone would be worthless without a Beastmaster's innate empathy. All elves share a mystical attunement with the natural world, but while most embrace this bond to gain greater wisdom and fellowship with other living creatures, dark elves and beastmasters in particular employ it as another weapon in their arsenal of torment. It matters not whether the beast is a raging manticore, a cunning harpy, or the wisest of Kalador's ancient dragons. Eventually, all submit to the beastmaster's will or perish under his lash. So, the beastmaster helps any of the large monstrous creatures that you have that are in the rare section that we'll get to much later. It helps you prevent them from going frenzy and going berserk and going all over the table and killing whatever's in front of them. So if you don't have a Beastmaster on those units, that can happen unless it's a mount for one of the lords or heroes. But again, I don't really see that being, like, maybe they'd make that as a hero option to help you bolster any of the monstrous beasts that you do eventually bring into the army. But like I said, I don't really see that being a lord option, maybe a hero option, and that's assuming they want to include it, according to, like, I think most armies have about 3 or 4 heroes, if I think about that. But I'm trying to, there's another one called the Death Hag, and this is another really small one, and I'll read it here for you because she also has poisoned attacks, but a little bit different. The Death Hags are the priestesses of the Witch Elves, the guardians of Cain's mysteries. It is they who mix the noxious potions that drive the Witch Elves into their battle rage, and they who craft the poisons with which they taint their blades. They know also how to wield the secret names of their gods as obscene weapons that can befuddle their foes or strike them down with madness. So that's the little bit on Death Hags there, and we'll see how that kind of plays out with the game coming live here, hopefully pretty soon, and we'll see if they make them a hero choice, because they would have frenzy and they would have that poisoned attack again. So they'd be a pretty good utility hero to help focus things down, focus down like a lord in combat. I'm not sure what their kind of campaign presence would be like. Maybe increasing public order to your faction, but I could see that more so in the master than I could in this thing. But maybe there's a corruption mechanic that we're going to see with Dark Elves, a la like Vampiric Corruption. So I could see that happening too. But we'll kind of see how that pans out. And just as a reminder, guys, Cain is pretty much the main god of the Dark Elves, like Assyrian is the main god of the High Elves. So you're going to hear Cain a lot, even though they both worship pretty much the same pantheon, High Elves and Dark Elves. Dark Elves are all about Cain, High Elves are all about Assyrian, and the Wood Elves are all about, oh man, I can't even remember the name of it. But Orion is like I don't want to say an incarnate of it, but there has to be like there's a whole big thing behind the tree in the Wood Elf Society and Orion itself in the Great Hunt, and I'll go into that when I do the Wood Elf video, but I wanted to get the Dark Elf and High Elf self first. And again, getting ahead of myself as I do. But that kind of rounds off the Lords and Heroes for Dark Elves. I want to start getting into the core choices here because the core choices are going to be pretty fun. I think you guys are really going to enjoy what they have to offer because, again, it's going to be quite similar to the High Elves with a little bit of difference. So let's just jump on in here with the Warriors of the Dark Cities. Dark Elf armies are formed around a core of utterly merciless soldiers, schooled in slaughter by a lifetime of survival amidst the twisted streets of Naggaroth's cities. Most such warriors are conscripted into service, but a few muster willingly, having identified some manner in which the battle will play to their personal advantage. The Dark Elf Warriors. Many Dark Elves forsake melee weapons in favor of delivering death from afar, armed with repeater crossbows, magazine-fed weapons capable of unleashing blistering hails of bolts. These dark shards can take positions at the rear of the battlefield, firing storms of iron-tipped bolts against approaching foes, or move forwards to weaken the enemy line with a withering volley before the Dark Elf attack charges home. Though often scorned by other warriors for their distance of close quarters battle, the Dark Shards are unflinchingly proud of their marksmanship and are certainly no less cruel than their fellows. It is not uncommon for Dark Shard to forego a killing strike to eye or heart in favor of a gut shot or other debilitating blow, which will ultimately, no less lethal, guarantees that the enemy's last moments will be spent in mewling agony. All Dark Elves are arrogant beyond tolerance, but bleak swords far outstrip even other Naggarothi in this regard. Each believes himself to be the greatest warrior of his age, needless of aid and heedless of danger. Bleak swords forsake the spear and repeater crossbow, deeming the former a peasant's weapon, the latter a craven's armament. Instead, they wield slender dueling blades that flash past an enemy's guard to slit his throat and pierce his heart. Dread spears consider themselves to be true soldiers, and look down upon the bleak swords as brash adventurers unsuited to the proper business of battle. Through blood spilt and shed, they have learnt the strength of discipline, of the locked shield wall bristling with wicked spear points. Dreadspear regiments are therefore the reliable bastions around which a Dreadlord can form his battle plan. Whilst the army's wilder warriors roam freely to slaughter at will, the Dreadspears hold key position and repel counterattacks. So the three core units of the Dark Elves are the Dark Shards, the Dreadspears, and the Bleak Swords. Those names kind of go without saying, and we've already kind of described it what they do, but again, Dark Shards use the repeater crossbow, Bleak Swords are just sword infantry, and Dread Spears are just spear infantry. And I'd be interested to see if they gave them a non-shielded variant. You can choose that in the tabletop to put no shield on them for a point less. Don't know why you would, because it's so advantageous, but again, I could see it happening in Total War Warhammer 2 because we have that in a lot of other units already. But the kind of cool thing about the Dark Shards, and I want to go into the repeater crossbow, is that it's a very iconic weapon for the Dark Elves. We saw it in the trailer. We saw basically those High Elves standing there and just getting plunged in the chest and the neck. Those were repeater crossbows. And those repeater crossbows, while they don't shoot as far, they have 24-inch range in tabletop, they have armor piercing, and they have the ability to shoot multiple shots. So the way I see this translating into Total War Warhammer 2 is that we're going to have an early AP unit, I would think a less range, but a higher rate of fire, or maybe even more ammunition. So even though they're not going to be shooting as far as some of the other races, like maybe even their High Elf Longbowmen counterparts, I see that they're going to be pouring on a lot more shots in a smaller distance. So I'm curious to see how some of the Dreadlords and Masters are going to be able to maybe even add ammunition or weapon strength or overall range to the Dark Shards. I'm interested to see how that's going to work, because I think they're also going to have high weapon strength as well. So again, very interested in that. With the Dark Elves, though, you get a sword infantry. You don't have a sword infantry with the High Elves. And that's always kind of been a critique at the tabletop. There's never been that kind of nice little boon of having just a straight up sword infantry, because sometimes you don't really want to spend that extra money for spears, even though the spears get the advantage of fighting in additional ranks, which doesn't make a translation into Total War Warhammer. I would be very interested, though, to see, because the High Elves and Dark Elves refer to their spearmen as fighting in phalanxes. I'd be interested to see if they brought back, or if they brought a dynamic of, say, like the Greek hoplite or the Greek phalanxes from some of the other Total Wars into the gameplay of the Dark Elves and the High Elves. I'd be really interested to see that, because it would very much change the way that spearmen are typically used in battles. Because I mean, think about it, you kind of keep them either in the flank of your army or in the back of your army as you get to the mid to late game to act as protection against cavalry. Well, what if they can't have that mobility unless you take them out of phalanx, and they have to kind of be more of like a central front line for you? I'd be very interested to see if they do that dynamic. That's, again, very speculative, but I'd love to see that. But let's move on here a little bit to the Dark Riders, because I know that that is another unit here that is going to be very similar to the Illyrian Reavers from the High Elves, but they kind of fall into what's called like the Ravagers of the World, and that includes the Black Ark Corsairs, the Shades, which we'll get into, and the Dark Riders. So I'll read this little blurb on the Ravagers of the World, and I'll start in on the Dark Riders here. So the Dark Elves prey ruthlessly on the other realms, believing their strength and cunning to be the only justification they need for their predations. Yet there are those who have perfected such wicked deeds to a form of art, so single-mindedly do they pursue the slaughter of weaklings. So we'll jump into the Dark Riders and get to the Black Ark Corsairs after this. In the grim days when armies of demons besieged Ulthuan, keen-eyed messengers from the Nagarites kept guard for any signs of a demonic intrusion. These Dark Riders wore cloaks of black feathers, invoking a raven-headed god, Nethu, to keep them hidden from the eyes of the enemy. During the Civil War, the Dark Riders earned a more sinister reputation. They traveled ahead of Nagarites' hosts, sowing terror and confusion wherever they rode, burning villages and driving their people into the wilds. To this day, Dark Riders are messengers and pillagers both, carrying tidings between the great cities of Nagaroth, or else riding deep into other lands as harbingers of destruction. Their horses, once pure-blood steeds of Nagarath, are now so twisted by magic and torture they have become something altogether more malevolent and ravenous. In battle, Dark Riders take delight in skirting the enemy flanks to attack war machines and cut lines of supply. They revel in the prospect of running down terror-stricken victims, dragging out every moment of wild panic as long as possible before delivering the final heart-seeking strike. So you get that kind of fast attack, skirmisher-type cavalry with these guys that you see in almost every army, with the ability, to shoot in a full circle around them, skirmish out it, and basically engage quickly in the backlines with some sort of vanguard deployment. And they're going to follow, again, very similar to the Illyrian Reavers, who use spears and bows. These guys are going to be using that same mechanic, and that they will be using those repeater crossbows that we just talked about. So that makes me wonder if they will also have, like I was saying, maybe an AP dynamic or a high weapon strength dynamic to make them a little more useful. I'd say in competitive play, when I go online, I rarely ever use those fast attack cavalry units, although they probably are used to great extents, and I'm just not really good at them. I'm very curious to see if they try to bolster the appearance of those things in the competitive landscape, or just in the army as a whole. One thing I did want to mention, though, is that they fall exactly like I was saying, the Illyrian Reavers with spears and those repeater crossbows. So I'm very interested to see that translated into Total Warhammer 2 here. But now jumping over here to the Black Ark Corsairs, they are going to be very similar to the Lothern Sea Guard. They've got the same kind of role in the Dark Elf Society, which we'll kind of find out right here. But as you'll see from the units themselves, that they're really cool. They're, again, one of my more favorite units. Just like I like the Lothern Sea Guard, I like these guys a lot too. So let's jump right on in here. Black Ark Corsairs are notorious reavers, having spent their entire lives pillaging distant lands. They are the lionized darlings of Nagarothi society, embodying as they do the drive to earn riches and glory. It is hard. It is a hard, dangerous life in the raiding fleets, but a successful voyage can see a captain and crew return laden down with wealth beyond the dreams of most city dwellers. It is not uncommon for a corsair fleet to spend years ransacking foreign lands, returning home only when their holds are bursting with slaves and plunder. As they tend to do most of their fighting in the top masts of ships and the crowded tangle of dockside streets, Black Ark corsairs prefer fast weapons that give them an edge in one-on-one fights. Cutlasses, punch daggers, and barbed knives are common, as are repeater handbows. Corsairs eschew shields and metal armor, relying on cloaks fashioned from sea dragon hide to preserve them from injury. They also carry a vile array of nets, grapples, and barbed chains. Such tools are not only useful for getting a grip on the slippery flanks of a ship, but also for ensnaring fleeing victims who are soon thereafter dragged to a terrible fate. So I again really like these guys because they're like almost all the units have like 2 weapons in their hands. They have this really spiky, jagged looking armor. Their cloaks are awesome because they're very reptilian looking. They're, again, sea dragon hide cloak, so you know, as reptilian as it gets. I just really enjoy these guys. They don't have the kind of awesome dynamic that the Lothern Sea Guard, in that they can use bows and their spears and shields. But I mean, you do get some form of range with them with the ability to use repeater hand crossbows. That's always nice. But not everyone can have those. It's, well, I'm sorry, actually, the entire unit can have repeater hand bows as well. But you can either give them 1 weapon or a repeater hand bow or 2 weapons. So I'm curious to see if they make that a separate option for this, for Total War Warhammer 2. If you can maybe have them, just like you can have with Quarrelers with great weapons or Quarrelers with just normal weapons. I wonder if you can have Black Ark Corsairs with repeater hand bows or with additional hand weapons, or just maybe that's their default and you can kit them another way. But I'm really interested to see how they do them because they're so beautiful. I mean, you can see these units. They're really cool looking. They're really ornate. I dig on them hard, if you guys can't tell. But they're, again, one of the more distinct units because they kind of are reminiscent to the White Lions of the High Elves in the sense that they have light armor and a really cool ornate cloak that is kind of like their name, not necessarily their namesake, but kind of their identifying symbol. But the last unit for the core of the Dark Elves, because they have quite a bit of special units just like the High Elves do, are the Witch Elves. And we saw these in the trailer again, that they were the very first Dark Elf you see. They're kind of scuttering from tree to tree, and you get that close-up of them in the face. I'll play a picture here for you. But you get that close-up of them in the face right before things kind of go to shit. But here's the Witch Elves. Witch Elves are the cruelest of all their heartless race, for they live only to serve Cain's malevolent demands for bloody, agonizing sacrifice. Their observances to the Lord of Murder are blood-slicked affairs. Steel-beating hearts are ripped from victims' chests and hurled into fires. Writhing flesh is daubed with gore-red runes, and altars are decorated with the entrails of dying captives. Yet ceremonies are but a part of the Witch Elves' worship. Their truest observances take place upon the field of battle. On the eve of war, Witch Elves drink blood laced with poisonous herbs, driving them into a divine frenzy. Whilst in this god-touched state, Witch Elves give no thought to their own defense, and seek only to hack foes apart in a blood-drenched orgy of slaughter. There is little grace to such an assault, merely a whirling storm of venom-coated blades that slash the foe with maddened fury. Those enemies unfortunate enough to survive their wounds are rounded up by the Witch Elves at the battle's end. These poor souls are torn apart in wild victory celebrations, their blood offered in libation to the ever-thirsting Lord of Murder. So, you get a pretty vivid image of how the Witch Elves work, especially with a name like Witch Elves. They have poisoned attacks as well, and I think we're going to see a lot more poisoned attacks in Total War Warhammer 2. I mean, we talked about Clan Pestilence and the Skaven and how a lot of them have poison attacks. We've already talked about 3 units who have got poison attacks here in the Dark Elves, so I wouldn't be surprised if we get a lot of that. And this Lizardmen, the Skinks can shoot poisoned blow darts. So I think we're going to see a lot of that, and I think it's going to change the way a lot of the engagements go because it does slow units down. So imagine if you get Witch Elves or maybe some unit getting some poison into the oncoming army, and you've got your dark shards able to pluck more ammo into them. So I'm very curious to see how if they're going to make poison weapons so prominent in this one as they have in the tabletop for these armies. But again, the witch elves you're going to see are going to be pretty similar to the war dancers, and not the Asari spear women of the wood elves, but mainly the war dancers. And I don't know if they'll do something where they give them high weapon strength, but I could see them having, you know, low melee defense, high melee attack, and they have frenzy in the tabletop, so they're probably going to have that translated right across as well. They also have an ability called Madness of Cain. You basically, at the end of your turn, you can roll on a table that gives the unit special abilities. It basically, I'm trying to get an idea of which the abilities are. There's specific gifts that they get. Let's see here. I'll just read it to you guys, so you can join me in this exploratory adventure. At the end of each of your turns, roll a d6 for each of your characters that is a unit of witch elves. On a score of 4+, nothing happens. On a score of 3 or less, that character immediately suffers d6 strength 3 hits as the witch elves lose all control and turn on their ally. So that gives you an idea of how much of a loose cannon these guys are. The gifts of Cain are exclusive to the death hags that we talked about earlier, and those gifts of Cain get them certain abilities like negative penalties to leadership, gives them additional attacks, and it gives the models frenzy that she's with. So you can put the death hag with a certain group, and it makes it that the whole unit's got frenzy. So if they did incorporate her as a hero, I could see her having like a small aura that incorporates frenzy to people around them. That's something that we don't really see in a lot of armies in Total War Warhammer, so it'd be great to see that in Total War Warhammer 2. Even though there's really not that many coming out. You know, since there's only 3, nothing about the Skaven, those don't exist. I swear to God I didn't just do a lore video on them. But that kind of rounds off just the core units here. We'll jump into the special units, which is a little bit more robust, and then round things off here with rares and legendary lores as well. But without further ado, let's jump on into special. Coming back to the Ravagers of the World in the Shades. The ancestors of the Shades once ruled Clarkarand, but were betrayed and exiled by their peers. Now the outcast clans have become utterly at home in the wilderness of the Black Spying Mountains. Moving as silently as ghosts and through petrified forests and razor-sharp rocks, their lives are vicious, even by the harsh standards of Dark Elves. Every day is a battle for survival with the dread beasts of the mountains. Every night a gauntlet of drum-driven kin sacrifice and death dueling. The Shades' hardiness makes them valued additions to any raiding fleet, and many dreadlords expend much wealth in enticing them to his cause. When the army attacks, the Shades infiltrate the enemy battle line. From this position, they can harass the foe with volleys of dark-fletched bolts, or strike out and slay war machine crews with glinting blades. We kind of have a unit just like the Shadow Warriors and the High Elves, or the Way Watchers and Deepwood Scouts of the Wood Elves, in that you've got a scout skirmisher unit that's going to have a vanguard in it, and it's going to be able to be kitted to really harassing back lines. As you heard from the description, they use either weapons or they have crossbows that they can really use to good advantage. As you see with most things, there's no conventional bows with the Dark Elves. It's all some variation of those little crossbows. For the Shades in specific, they can actually use great weapons too. So I'd be interested to see that happen. You don't see that very much in tabletop, to be honest, but as it is, they have hand weapons and repeater crossbows, not to be confused with repeater, or the hand crossbows that the Corsairs have. These are the full repeater crossbows that the Dark Shards use. So it'll be interesting to see them having that circle range, just like the other, like I was mentioning, the Deepwood Scouts and the Way Watchers, and being able to get them in there. I wouldn't be surprised if they snuck poisoned attacks on them, to be totally honest, because you know like the Deepwood Scouts and the Wayward, or I'm sorry, I keep wanting to say Wayward. Deepwood Scouts and Way Watchers all have that kind of some sort of crazy cool mechanic with their ranged, but that's your kind of skirmisher unit for the Dark Elves. And in the High Elves, you had the Phoenix Guard. Well, with the Dark Elves, you have Blackguard, and the Blackguard are very reminiscent. But let me jump in here. So the Blackguard of Nagarond. The Blackguard are Malekith's personal army, answerable to no other than save he. They are recruited from the offspring of families high in the Witch King's favor, taken at birth from mothers who are soon thereafter put to the sword. With no family ties to distract them, these children are raised within the barracks of the Blackguard and taught the myriad skills of death and destruction that are required of Malekith's foremost elite. As soon as they are able, these young warriors are pitched against each other in murderous fights to the death, so that only the strongest, quickest-witted, and most merciless survive. This violence is not restricted to the training fields and arenas. An intake of recruits can lose up to half its number as the incautious, injured, and unpopular are disposed of by their fellows. As they mature, these fledgling fighters are regularly visited by the Witch King, who lavishly rewards those who show great cunning and bloodlust. When the aspirants finally come of age and their training is completed, Malekith pledges each of them great wealth and lands, which will be theirs if they serve him well for 200 years. Those Blackguard that survive their arduous tour of duty go on to become rulers of cities, leaders of armies, and favored members of the Witch King's court. However, this promised generosity seldom requires fulfillment, for there are many ways to perish in Malekith's service, not at least as scapegoat for his frustrations. Yet, if the risks are great, then the rewards are greater still, and so every member of the Blackguard serves without faltering until death claims him. They are a bulwark of grim steel on the battlefield, holding their ground where all others have fled, fighting with a determination fit to transform defeat into a victory, and victory into a glorious massacre. The barracks of the Blackguard are divided into 20 towers, which compete against each other in contests of war and torture. The Witch King grimly encourages competition between the towers, and each year at the beginning of the season of Blood, a tournament is held to determine which tower will hold dominance over the others for the coming year. The leaders of these factions are the Tower Masters, veterans of the Blackguard, so inculcated with death and battle that they choose to continue in Malekith's service after their 2 centuries of duty have been completed. These hardened warriors rule their underlings with a will of iron, determined that their tower shall not be shamed by a lack of discipline, or worse, a glimmer of mercy on the part of their charges. So you kind of have like a Dark Elf Harry Potter with the Blackguard of Nagaron, because they're like balls deep in their tower warfare here. But I really dig the Blackguard, just like I like the Phoenix Guard. You know, they're immune to psychology, they're stubborn, they have that always strike first. Always strike first is in both the High Elves and the Dark Elves. So I want to know how they're going to translate that to Total War Warhammer, because there's not really a mechanic like that that's reminiscent of the tabletop, where, you know, you can strike first. Your 2 armies meet, and they slam against each other, and they fight immediately. So I would like to see if they incorporate that. Maybe they just means that they're going to move faster on the playing field, because the actual movement of Dark Elves and High Elves in general is faster than most races of men. So that's something to attribute as well. But you see from the Blackguard, they're like a direct parody of the Phoenix Lords. Phoenix Lords have these beautiful helmets with large phoenix wings sweeping out from them, the regal cloaks and everything, the blue on the inside, the white on the outside, and this beautiful gold scale mail. In the Blackguard, you just see head to toe, black and red, just giant, not ponytails, but huge things crests coming from their helmets and dripping down over them, just really sinister and mean looking. And like I said, you're going to see that throughout the entirety of this army, especially when we get those to the Executioners coming up. So I really enjoy them. I think they're going to be a unit that's going to be, they're going to have great weapons, so they're going to be really hard counter to enemy armor, and I would think that they're going to have either anti-infantry or anti-large. It's hard to say which one, because they're just so good of a unit in general. So I could see AP for sure, but anti-large or anti-infantry, not sure how that's going to be, with a very high weapon strength, a good melee defense, maybe not as much a melee attack, but I mean, it would make sense from the actual tabletop, because they have 5 weapon skill, which again is kind of indicative on a scale from 1 to 10 of their melee attack, to give you an idea, with most things being in the 3 to 4 range when it comes to just general units of the line. But so that's the Blackguard. That's the parodies to the Phoenix King. Now you've got your Swordmasters, and with the Swordmasters of Hoeth, you've got the Harganeth executioners. And you're going to see here from this picture how mean these guys look. Harganeth is the spiritual center of Cain's worship, with many shrines to the Lord of Murder, dominated by the towering edifice of the Great Temple. It is from Harganeth that Hellborn rules over the witch elves, and countless victims are brought here to be sacrificed upon Cain's altars. It was in Harganeth that the first ceremonies of execution were held. In the wake of a great victory over the High Elves, the guards of Harganeth led thousands of captives to the pinnacle of the temple and beheaded them with full ceremony and ritual. Such was the Dark Elves' delight when they beheld the bloodied heads tumbling down the steps, that from that day forth, executioners became a regular feature in Harganeth's society and a punishment for all manner of diverse crimes. So adept have the guards of Harganeth become at their bloody art that they are now notorious throughout Nagaroth as the Executioners. Each spends half his waking day in his duties as sentry, and the other half practicing with his blade. This occasionally takes the form of ritual sparring between different executioners, but more often involves the honing of death blows upon luckless captives and miscreants. The executioners are not frenetic butchers, but rather cold-blooded killers who take pride in dispatching their foes with minimum effort. It is said that a fully trained executioner knows the way to kill any creature with but a single blow, whether by decapitation, disembowelment, or a single thrust through the heart. They are heartless murderers who see their role as a sacred one, and unlike other Dark Elves, do not make sport of their victims, killing them swiftly and cleanly. It can take decades for an executioner to perfect his chosen strike, to judge precisely the angle of the blow and how the blade might be deflected or otherwise cheated by a splinter of bone. Every executioner carries a drache, the ceremonial weapon of his calling. Each drache is forged by a wielder under the supervision of the armorers of Cain's great temple. As an executioner learns his bloody skills, he also refines his weapon so that the two are as one. Some executioners prefer a heavy axe-like blade, others a slender sword, depending upon their own abilities and preferred method of killing. Regardless of design, these weapons are fearsome in battle, able to cleave through armor, flesh, and bone with but a single flawlessly placed strike. So you have these really, really awesome units. You can see these awesome, cool, grotesque, vicious, sinister skull masks. They just look like the Punisher, quite literally look like Dark Elf Punishers. That's going to become a meme, I swear to it. They've got Killing Blow in the tabletop, so I'm wondering how that's going to make the transition. Maybe they're going to be AP and anti-large, with the Blackguard being AP and anti-infantry, because they're beastly in the tabletop. They're not very strongly armored, just like the Swordmasters of Hoeth, but they pack a punch when they hit. So I'm really curious to see. In the tabletop, all of them have swords, so I'm not sure where the axe bit comes in. But they're, like I said, they're really awesome to see. With that always strikes first component of the Dark Elves, it makes for a really strong unit, especially like I was saying with the Swordmasters. It's the same thing here with Harganeth Executioners, because those are great weapons that they're wielding, those giant ass swords, and they've got heavy armor as well, which kind of counters the light armor fact that the fact that the Swordmasters of Hoeth have light armor. I know I said that the Executioners were lightly armored. I just meant that they don't have shields, so they only have a 4+ save. So that kind of is a bit of a bummer, but I'm not sure how they're going to translate that to Total War Warhammer, because with that Killing Blow mechanic, it kind of makes Executioners, well, Executioners. So I'm very interested to see if they do something along the lines of maybe just an increased weapon strength or some sort of frenzy ability. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with these guys, but I'm really curious to see what they do with these guys. So we said that the High Elves have their repeater bolt thrower. Well, they have the same thing with the Dark Elves. It's a little more, again, sinister and jagged and spiky looking, but they do have the same thing. And it's not a big blur, but it's definitely worth covering. Repeater bolt throwers are used at sea to clear the decks of enemy vessels, and on land to scythe down ranks of enemy warriors. A mechanism of counterweights and cords allows the repeater to shoot a hail of bolts, or a single missile with a force enough to pierce a dragon's hide. A repeater's bolts are barbed and difficult to remove from the wounds they inflict. Those injured, but not slain, by such a shot often suffer such horrendous maiming on the bolt's removal that they are worthless as slaves. and therefore left to bleed to death or given over to the bloody caresses of the witch elves. So you almost give a description that's almost spot on the same as the high elves, for the addition that it's barbed and meant to maim you, as most things are in the high elf or dark elf society. But again, you have the exact same kind of mechanic as the high elf version. It's going to have armor piercing. It's going to have a good range. The dark elf one does not have the capability to shoot differently. I think it always has to shoot one bolt. I haven't seen it differently. I'm looking here at the rules, trying to see if it can do a single bolt, and I don't see it like the other ones did. The repeater can fire either as an ordinary bolt thrower or instead fires 6 smaller repeating bolts. There we go. There we go. With the profile given below. Okay, so you do have that option again, like you did for the high elves. I thought it was interesting. In the high elf book, it's separated as 2 separate little blurbs, like 2 separate little line items that show you how it can shoot. And this, it's only in the description text. So I apologize for that little confusion right there. But let's jump over to the equivalent of, it's hard to say the silver helms, they're more equivalent to the dragon princes in the cold one knights, which are, I would honestly say, I know the Blackguard are a really top pick of mine as far as awesome units, but the cold one knights have always been my go-to and favorite unit. Anything cavalry obviously is going to be my favorite. I mean, you guys know me. But here is the cold one knights, and we're going to see cold ones in the Lizardmen as well. So let's I'll start off with a little blurb about cold ones themselves, then we'll go to the knights themselves. Cold ones are reptiles that live in the caves and tunnels beneath Haggrafe. Their chill flesh is almost immune to pain, and their bodies exude a toxic slime. Dark elves can withstand small quantities of this substance, and tiny amounts are used to make poisons. Where the cold ones truly excel, however, is in service as war steeds for Naggaroth's knights. Though single-minded when hunting, cold ones are extremely stubborn and very stupid. It takes a great strength and willpower to master such a steed, and those dark elves that do are feared, if not respected, by their fellows. So just a quick little blurb here. Like I said, you will see these in Lizardmen. Their cavalry rides them. Their lords and heroes ride them as well. So it's going to be cool to see a crossover between the dark elves and the Lizardmen on that. Cold One Knights count themselves amongst the finest warriors in Naggaroth. They are nobles of great wealth and ambition, whose warrior instincts elevate them far beyond the upstart cavalrymen of lesser races. The knights' weapons are the finest that can be bought in the great cities. Long swords enchanted in such a manner as to never lose their edge, and their tall lances sharp enough to pierce the hide of a dragon. Their mounts, too, are superior to those of other lands. No horse, no matter how well trained or carefully bred, could ever hope to match the savagery of a Naggarothite Cold One. It is a daring dark elf who takes a Cold One for his steed, for the lizards savagely attack all who come near them, recognizing warm-blooded creatures as prey by the smell alone. This is dangerous in itself, and no few strutting nobles have been savaged by their own mounts, much to the amusement of their rivals. To avoid this, the Dark Elves must anoint himself repeatedly with the Cold One's own foul-smelling slime, so that the beast will accept him. There is a great price to pay for the Dark Elf, though, for the fumes of this noxious balm are extremely potent, burning the nostrils, numbing the skin, and destroying their taste buds, so that the rider can no longer smell or taste food, or feel a lover's touch. So it is that a Cold One is not only a fearsome war mount, but also a declaration of bravery and ambition on the part of the knight. For many Dark Elves, this heavy price is considered one worth paying, for in doing so a warrior proves his dedication to the Witch King and can earn great political as well as physical reward. One thing I wanted to jump into, because it was brought up in the Blackguard and I got so concerned with making my Harry Potter joke, is that the Witch King and a lot of the lore with the books and everything is seemingly extremely benevolent, because that's the kind of persona he wants to put out, is like, oh, I'm the rightful ruler. I am just like in 300, I am a kind god. I am a benevolent ruler. I should be the ruler of all elves, but he has like these freak wild mood swings, and he just will blame anyone for any mishap, and he'll strike down his vassals and his underlings with great impudence. It's really kind of freaky, because when you read it, you're like, oh, this guy's not too bad. Oh no, never mind. He just killed like 5 people that were supposed to be his like most trusted confidants. So all of the Dark Elves are always kind of like pandering for for Malekith's love and affection, because they know the alternative to that is his ire, and his ire is terrifying. That's what it's really ingrained in every single bit of the Dark Elf society is whatever you do, don't piss off the Witch Elf. Not Witch Elf, sorry, Witch King. But, okay, so Cold One Knights, you kind of get the same, even in the beginning of the description of these guys, you kind of get a very similar feel that you do with the Dragon Princes from the High Elves, like I was saying in the other video. These kind of elite cavalry units that kind of see themselves a step above everyone else. The Dragon Princes, it talks about them kind of, okay, well, at the same time they do see themselves that way. When it comes to battle, they kind of ride on the same level as everyone else. The Cold One Knights, as you see here, are just completely distant from the rest of society, it looks like. Like, okay, they wear this badge as a badge of arrogance as well as honor. But jumping into the actual rules, they cause fear, which is pretty awesome, but their mounts have stupidity. So I'm really curious if they're going to put that in there, because that stupidity means that sometimes they don't attack, because the actual mount itself is pretty brutal. It's got attacks of its own. It's got 2 attacks in the tabletop. So I'd be interested to see, watching, like, just imagine zooming in and seeing these very decked from head to toe, as you can see from this picture here, Cold One Knights with these dinosaur mounts ripping up units as it's slashing and stabbing down with its lance or its sword. So it'd be really cool to kind of see that dynamic coming out of the actual mount, which is something we haven't really seen outside of the boars or the wolves of, or even some of the more monstrous mounts, of course, but some of just the more general cavalry mounts, we don't see that as much, except for some of the orc mounts. But again, I'm really interested to see if they bring that out there. They didn't do it as much with the Bretonnian horses, because the Bretonnian horses in the tabletop inflict a lot of damage. They're pretty strong for horses, but again, I want to see those Cold Ones just like pick up a Lizardmen skink and just swallow it in one bite, just all the way down the throat. But one cool thing is that the Cold Ones themselves confer a thick-skinned bonus to the knight, so it gives it a higher armor. So I'd be interested to see if we have in the Cold One Knights maybe something kind of like the Blood Knights, where they're anti-large, they're armor-piercing, but they have maybe higher than normal, what's it called? Higher than normal armor, but maybe not as fast, because the Cold Ones are not terribly quick. So that's something that I can definitely see as like, okay, hey, you get more armor, but as a result, your army's not, your cavalry's not going to move as fast. Maybe kind of something along the lines of the Chosen Knights. Because I believe, as I check here, where is it? I'm trying to find the bit again on, yes, the Dark Steed moves 9 inches, and the Cold One moves 7. So that's to give you an idea of, it's a little bit slower than your standard kind of horse here. But with the actual Cold One Knights, you get our first chariot of the Dark Elves, and in the High Elves, you've got the Illyrian, or the chariots of Tiranoc, and you've got the White Lion chariots. You've got now the Cold One chariots with the Dark Elves. Let me just jump onto them. So, Cold One chariots are sometimes given as gifts to those rare knights who have pleased Lord Malekith with their devotion and prowess in battle. To possess such a machine is a symbol of great prestige and is ranked amongst the highest stations in battle. Even though the Cold One's true succulent nature can often bring the chariot to a jarring halt at the most inopportune moments. Should the crew retain mastery of their chariot, they thunder across the battlefield like gods of war, wicked spears leveled and Cold Ones roaring fit to freeze the blood. In the last moment before impact, the crew goad their steeds to one last effort, and the chariot crashes into the enemy ranks, crushing foe with the weight of its impact and opening flesh to the bone with the blades upon its flanks. So you get a fear-inspiring chariot in these guys. So again, they do suffer from the same stupidity special rule as the Cold Ones themselves do, but I'm really curious to see how these guys play out, because there is another chariot that the Dark Elves have, and I'm curious to see, because I actually don't have as much experience with that other chariot, because I actually have played with the one chariot we just mentioned here, the Cold One's chariot. So I'd be interested to see if they bring in both, just like you would for the High Elves, because like we said, they've got both of their chariots. So let me actually, the Scourge Runner chariot is the other one. And that's the one that's actually got beasts on it and everything. So we'll go into that in just a second, but I want to finish off with the Cold One chariot. Because I think we'll see, very similar to the White Lion chariot, a higher toughness, like more tanky chariot that is meant to really kind of stay in combat versus the other one meant to plow through and harass. So I like just like we've seen in other races, especially with Chaos, with the Gore chariot and whatnot, and how that both have different roles in what they do with their armies. So I definitely see that coming in with the High Elves and the Dark Elves here, and maybe an armor-piercing capability, because the Scourge Runner chariot actually has a harpoon on it. So let's jump in here, because I keep bringing it up. I want to jump on it. The Scourge Runner chariots. Beastmasters are always eager to find fresh subjects. For the many perils of a battlefield, gladiatorial arena, and neglect ensure that stables suffer a higher rate of attrition. Small bands of beastmasters roam the wilds in the Scourge Runner chariots, searching fen, crag, and cave for suitable prizes. Armed with barbed nets and harpoons attached to strong chains, they snare and immobilize their prey. Once captured, the beast is trussed securely, yoked to the back of the chariot, and dragged many miles back to Clark Errand, where a life of slavery and torment awaits it, if the creature survives the journey at all. Scourge Runner chariots are a common sight on the battlefield, where they search for suitable recruits amongst the enemy ranks. If no fitting candidate presents itself, the Beastmaster can vent their frustration as best they can, cutting down foemen with lash, blade, and harpoon before claiming the twitching bodies as fodder for their hungry charges. So these guys, they've got dark steeds rather than having cold ones. They're going to move a little bit faster here. They, again, have a Ravager harpoon on them. This is a bolt thrower that can be fired even if the Scourge Runner chariot moves. So it's got a barbed bolt, and it's meant to be anti-large. So you're going to have something that's going to have maybe an AP on it as well. It's going to have anti-large, and it's going to be slightly low range, just like some of the like the wolf chariots of like the orcs and whatnot. So you're going to have something that's going to have to get close up and personal, but it's going to have skirmisher special rules and be pretty quick, so it can get away fast. Most of the chariots in all of Warhammer, for the most part, have good toughness, so that's indicative of like your armor rating. So I would see these guys being able to harass and be a hard counter for some of the more monstrous units that are going to be apparent in the Lizardmen and the Skaven, as we've talked about with like maybe the Rat Ogres or the Carnosaurs of the Skaven, or even maybe some of the Griffins or the Great Eagles or the Phoenixes that we've talked about from the High Elves. So this gives you a good anti-large ranged unit outside of maybe even the Repeater Bolt Thrower, which will probably have the capability to do anti-range as well. And apologies on the pronunciation there a second ago. Sometimes the things kind of jump out at me. But that covers the two chariots of the Dark Elves, and I want to round off the special choice by getting into some of the beasts of Nagaroth. And there's two that are in the special that I want to cover first, with the Harpies and Hydras. Hydras having a little bit more to them than the Harpies, of course, because who doesn't like, you know, a multi-headed dragon demon beast? So let's go in with the War Hydras. The Hydra is a titanic beast of the mountains, whose ill-tempered and ravenous nature has proven the doom of many an unsuspecting morsel. Indeed, so ferocious is the Hydra that campaigning armies often make wide detours to avoid intruding on such a beast's bone-strewn lair. Those that march on regardless to do so, either out of confidence in their battle prowess or ignorance of the Hydra's savagery. Only creatures as twisted as the Dark Elves would look upon the Hydra's vicious glory and deem it insufficient for the task at hand. But ever since the Witch King's Beastmasters first tamed the creatures, the Nagarothi have continually experimented with breeding techniques and dark enchantments to raise the raw ferocity and power of successive generations. The War Hydras of Nagaroth's armies are therefore a far more daunting foe than those the Dark Elves first encountered many long centuries ago in the Anuli Mountains. That can actually probably pronounce Anuli or Anulii. Tell me which one you guys think is more on point, and I'll definitely stick with that one. But going on. War Hydras are notoriously difficult for their handlers to control, and a Beastmaster must be quick with his lash, lest he be devoured in the enemy's stead. They are even more difficult to slay, for not only are their scaly bodies incredibly well armored, they also regenerate damage at a frightening rate. A foe's only chance is to sever all the monster's heads in a quick succession. If even a single one remains, the remainder will swiftly grow back and devour the impudent attacker for their troubles. There are many ways to be slain by a Hydra. Torn apart, swallowed whole, crushed underfoot, immolated, or even skewered by arrows as they ricochet off its scaled hide. Generals often see even their finest troops pulverized by just a single war Hydra, and are then left to watch with horror as the beast emerges unscathed from the carnage, vents forth an ear-splitting roar, and then charges forward with thundering strides to trample another regiment into ruin. So, I mean, why the hell would you not like Hydras? They're awesome. The Grecian myths come to life, and you'll see that with another unit coming up here. What are these called? The Dark Elves have a lot of Grecian influence in their beasts. I don't want to ruin what's coming up, but you'll see. But I'm curious to see how they do that regeneration dynamic, right? Because, you know, like I've said before, we've had that in other things, like the trolls and chaos trolls. So when the head is severed on a Hydra in tabletop, it increases its attack, and that's pretty beastly because it's got what's considered 5 wounds. So each time you lob a head off, it gets an extra attack. I'm sorry, what? It has 3 attacks plus 1 for each remaining wound. So yeah, so every attack, every wound that comes off it, it's going to hit harder and harder and harder and more often. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out in Total War Warhammer. I'm not sure if that's going to equate to a higher attack rate or maybe higher weapon strength as it gets more and more wounded. I mean, because that's going to be pretty awesome if that's the case. And also the fact that it can regenerate its heads, so I'm not sure how they're going to do that as well, because you can do that. So for each roll of 4+, the War Hydra immediately recovers a single wound lost earlier in the battle. So maybe there's going to be a dynamic where you can, maybe a skill you can press to give a certain percentage heal to the Hydra that is on some sort of refresh. Like maybe, okay, if it's at 50% health, you can activate this ability, and if it jumps back up to past 50% health, it resets the timer on the ability or something like that. That might be too broken. I'm just kind of speculating, but that'd be really fucking cool. And they also have the ability to shoot fiery breath or spit fire, so I'd be very interested to see that on the Hydras as well. Maybe some sort of breath weapon, kind of like the Giants do. Well, they don't really have a breath weapon, but they do have a kind of a bit of a shout there. And they do cause terror. So it's going to be awesome to see these things skulking through and being herded into the enemy with the Beastmasters, as you guys can see here. The Hydras always have someone in tow there. But that's kind of the first big beast of the Dark Elves, and we're getting to get into another one here. Not as large, but a little bit different, a little bit cool, a little bit different, but also pretty cool. The Harpies. Harpies make their nests in the uppermost spires of Karen Kar. Some claim they are the souls of slain witch elves given physical form. Others that they are a manifestation of Cain. They are certainly vicious enough for either to be true. In Nagarathi lore, Harpies are considered to be an omen of good fortune, and it is claimed that if they ever deserted Karen Kar, the city would fall soon after. Harpies are similar in temperament to the Dark Elves, for they delight in tormenting their victims. Hunger drives them to follow raiding fleets for months on end, soaring patiently in the skies until battle begins. So, you get a cool unit in that these guys are going to be able to fly. So I could see them as some sort of like early beast swarm unit, kind of like bats or something. Or I don't want to say Vargeists, because Vargeists are a little bit more tanky than these things are. These things are pretty papery, so I could see them kind of like the bat swarms of, say, you know, the vampire counts. And it'll be just kind of cool to have a flying harassment unit with the Dark Elves, because the Dark Elves are going to have a pretty strong air presence, I would assume, because they've got mana cores that can fly, they've got dragons that can fly, they've got harpies that can fly, dark pegasuses that can fly, or pegasi, sorry. So I see that them being very predominant air contention for, say, like a Bretonnians, or maybe someone like an Empire Toddbringer army. So I'm definitely interested to see how they do that. They don't have a ton of crazy special rules, but again, they can fly. It's going to be probably an early harassment unit, and that's going to really That's really going to round out the entirety of the special units for the Dark Elves. And if you guys haven't noticed, the Dark Elves don't really have as many units as the Skaven, or even the High Elves for that matter. I think when I counted out around 23 to 25 Dark Elf, with the Skaven having around 30 to 32. So that gives you an idea for the level of variety that we're probably going to get with the Skaven, a la maybe the Orcs, where you get a very, very set of diverse units that have very specific roles. So I'm very curious to see if they include all of what I've talked about so far, and if they keep it kind of true to form with the tabletop. They've done an amazing job so far, so it wouldn't surprise me at all. But let's jump on to the last section before we jump into Legendary Lords, the Rares. With, again, the Ravagers of the World. We did the Shades before, the Black Ark Corsairs before, and the Dark Riders. But we'll complete the Ravagers of the World in the Doomfire Warlocks. When Malekith first learned of the prophecy of demise, his initial wrathful blow fell against the Doomfire Warlocks of Haggraith. Fearing that they would rebel, the Witch King cursed them with hollowness, and their souls have teetered between the mortal world and the realm of chaos ever since. Thus, whilst other elves fear Slaanesh as a potential fate, Doomfire Warlocks feel the Dark Prince's grasp on their souls grow with ever-passing day. As the grip tightens, dark runes blaze into life on their flesh, an unholy fire that creeps slowly across the skin. If this process is not arrested before the Warlock's entire body is swathed in flame, his soul is snuffed out and consumed by the Dark Prince. This fate cannot be thwarted, for no mortal can long deny rapacious Slaanesh. It can, however, be stalled if the Warlock sacrifices others in his stead. The purer or mightier the soul, the better. Doomfire Warlocks descend upon villages in the dead of night, seeking victims to slake Slaanesh's thirst. Cloaked in shadow, they pass like phantoms through defenses, stealing prey from their beds before vanishing into the night. When a Dark Elf army musters, the Warlocks gather, hoping to capture mighty warriors to fuel their rites. To aid this cause, they infuse their scimitars with numbing curses that strip a foe of its senses with a single scratch. Alive but mindless, the victims are led from the battlefield on the rituals that will keep Slaanesh at bay for a few days more. The really cool thing about, just a lore thing here, in the High Elf Society, there's these cults of pleasure, and the cults of pleasure do worship Slaanesh. And although the Dark Elves seem like they would be a prime advocate of Slaanesh, they kind of fear it. They fear that if Slaanesh gets close to them, it'll steal their souls. And if you are a fan of the 40k universe, the Dark Eldar are always being consumed by Slaanesh slowly, so they use pain to feel. They lost the ability to feel, minus like pain and sexual pleasure and stuff like that. So you kind of see that in the Doomfire Warlocks a little bit here, that they're constantly being sucked in to Slaanesh, and although the other Dark Elves fear Slaanesh, these Doomfire Warlocks kind of embrace it wholeheartedly, in the sense that they do what they can to sate Slaanesh's thirst. And as a result, though, the Doomfire Warlocks, I think, are going to play very similar to the Sisters of the Thorn in the Wood Elves, because these guys are level 2 wizards, just like the Sisters of the Thorn are support casters as well. So they have the ability Soul Blight from the lore of Death and Doombolt from the lore of Dark Magic. And just to let you guys know, Doombolt is basically a magic missile. So these guys are fast cav again, so they're going to have that kind of ability to be skirmisher, like the Dark Riders or the Illyrian Reavers or some of the other skirmisher type cavalry we've seen in other armies, but they're also going to have that ability to shoot with that Doombolt. They've got hand weapons themselves. As you can see, they have really cool models here. You guessed it, they also have poisoned attacks. So there's that poison mechanic coming in again, and they maybe the ability to get some poison on a unit before it gets to your army, so that your Dark Shards can keep plucking away at it. And they have a ward save, so I wouldn't be surprised if that made itself into the army as well. In the actual tabletop, they're pretty feared because they can get to their back line and do some serious damage before you even get a chance to engage with the main bulk of the Dark Elf army. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were a very competitive choice, even from just maybe one unit of Cold One Knights for just your general cavalry, and these Doomfire Warlocks with maybe some sort of vanguard deployment or ability to really just harass back lines with that Doom Bolt to pluck off some of the artillery that we'll probably see when they join the grand campaigns. But that's the Doomfire Warlocks. Again, really cool units. You can see the Dark Riders and the Doomfire Warlocks. They have similar models. It's like I was saying in the Skaven, they have a shared kit. And we'll see that here with the next guy we're about to go into. We talked about the War Hydra and Grecian influences. Well, we're going to go now into Charybdis, which, if you haven't guessed, is also from Grecian as well. So let's go into Charybdis here. The Charybdis is a loathsome beast of the uncharted depths. Its kind seldom seen on land, save when the Dark Elves go one to war. Untold numbers of these primeval horrors churn the murky depths of Naggaroth's western coastline, setting their hunger on any creature foolish enough to cross their path. Occasionally, a Charybdis can be sighted upon the broken isles of Naggaroth's western coast, tentacles writhing with slime and sea spray as the beast hunts for tasty morsels. The Beastmasters of Clarkarend covet the Charybdis as a prize beyond treasures, and only the very wealthiest can hope to acquire one. Even an army of Dark Elves would be easy prey for such a creature in its own environment, and only by employing a sorceress to lure a Charybdis to the surface can a Beastmaster hope to capture one and break it to his will. Many Beastmasters make great fanfare of having tamed a Charybdis, but in truth, the creature needs little forcing into battle. It is a brutish and slow-witted beast at heart, and simply rampages wherever hunger leads it. This course of destruction must occasionally be altered by a timely swipe of the Beastmaster's scourge, lest the beast feast upon the Dark Elves rather than their foes. This is not to say that unfortunate accidents do not occur if the creature is not powerfully trained. More than one Beastmaster has met bloody reprisal from his fellows after a Charybdis has eaten its way through the Naggarothi ranks, but such occurrences are few and far between. Once broken, a Charybdis can be counted amongst the most formidable weapons at a Beastmaster's command. Its slimy body, adapted to resist the fanatic pressures of the ocean, is unstoppable once on land, possessing colossal strength and incredible fortitude. Smaller foes are plucked from the battlefield and swept into the Charybdis' maw by its crown of flailing tentacles. Larger ones are entangled and held fast, whilst razor-sharp teeth feast upon their succulent flesh. The Charybdis' digestive juices are ferociously efficient and can dissolve flesh, metal, and bone in a matter of minutes. The same cannot be said of enchanted artifacts and a few precious gemstones, which are curiously resistant to the attentions of the monster's gullet. Indeed, the belly of a slain Charybdis is often something of a treasure trove, full of whatever magical possessions adorned its victims at the moment of digestion. Such items provide some solace to a Beastmaster, who is unfortunate enough to lose his Charybdis battle. If he is lucky, the value of these treasures will at least partially offset the expense of acquiring a new plaything. So, you've got another giant beast here. It's going to be a large target, so it's going to be able to be picked off by archery range units no matter what. But here it is again, poisoned attacks, and it's going to be able to cause terror. And one of the cool things is the abyssal howl that it can do basically causes like super terror, unless something else has terror or fear or is immune to psychology. So I could see these things being really strong in countering low leadership armies or low leadership units, or engaging on a flank, something like that, to really help break your opponent. They have a special rule called Feast of Bones, and I'm not really sure how that's going to play into the actual game, because if all the attacks hit on the creature in the tabletop, it gets an additional really strong hit. So I'm wondering if that'll be some sort of activatable ability where it maybe does more damage for a brief amount of time with a cooldown. I could see that happening. Maybe it increases to its weapon strength, or it increases to melee attack, so it's attacking more often, because it's representative of basically all of its heads slamming into the opponent at one time causes an additional, like, basically like an impact hit, if you kind of think of it that way. But that's your Charybdis. It's going to be very similar to the War Hydra. You can even see that the model itself is basically a blue Hydra with very different looking heads. But we're now going to jump into One of the chariot type things, like, you know, the Empire have their pimp wagons. Well, they have got the same thing here with the Dark Elves in what's called the Bloodrack Shrines. Thousands of years ago, the Bloodrack Medusae were sorceresses of Grond, who used their magics and blood-feasting rituals to become more powerful, more beautiful than even the gods. In so doing, they came to the attention of the goddess Astarte, who is vain beyond measure and suffers no mortal competition. In retribution, the goddess of pleasure stripped the upstart mortals of their beauteous forms and caged them in pain-racked serpentine bodies. Even this punishment she deemed insufficient, and so she reduced their minds to be little more than those of beasts. Astarte left only one sliver of awareness to her victims, enough that they might always remember always remember with torment the beauty and power they once possessed. Morathi, who alone had accounted her comeliness to no need of magical enhancement, drove her former sisters from Grond's walls. She then gave thanks to Astarte for delivering a punishment well earned and set about replenishing the Dark Covenant's ranks. Now, the Bloodrack Medusae are bent to serve Morathi's need once more, though in a manner entirely different to that of their former lives. When a great campaign beckons, the hag sorceress sends warriors into the caverns below the spiteful peaks and the squalid lairs therein. Those who survive return to Grond with prisoners in tow, Bloodrack Medusae, their claws bound and their faces masked. At Morathi's direction, the captives are chained to Astarte's great blood-racked shrines and propelled by dark magic to the very forefront of the assembled armies. A blood-racked Medusa's gaze is a fearsome weapon. Should a victim's eyes lock with hers for even a second, his lifeblood violently rebels, flooding from every pore until his body collapses into a pool of its own gore. It is to guard against that the shrine keepers, priestesses so beguiled by their goddess that the act of worship has become their chief pleasure, wear masks polished to a mirror-like sheen. Worse still, all who fight near a Bloodrack shrine find their minds twisted by an echo of the Medusa's endless despair. All save the Dark Elves, that is. To them, the scent of suffering is akin to the finest perfume. A heady brew when mixed with the tang of fresh spilt blood. A heady brew. So you have got the first really kind of like chariot death wagon in the Dark Elves here. This thing is a large target. It's got magic resistance, but it's also got terror. And on top of it, it increases the leadership of units around it. And it's got some cool abilities because since, you know, Medusa and whatnot, you know, turns things to petrifies them, turns them to stone. And this in the Warhammer tabletop world, it has the killing blow special rule. So I'm wondering if we're going to be seeing like a high weapon strength, very slow to shoot, kind of what's it called, ranged artillery piece, just like you do in the Empire with their, like that, I can't remember the name of it, like their sun cannon, basically, because this thing has a very short range, but it has the ability to shoot 4 killing blow shots from it in what's called the Bloodrack Stare. And it's from the actual Medusas themselves and not the shrine itself, so I'm interested to see how they'll kind of incorporate that. This won't be like the Mortis engine in the sense that it will increase their fighting prowess. We'll get to that. There is something like that, but it will increase leadership in its range, and it is going to be able to cause terror, and it should have some really strong weapon strength capabilities. So we'll get to the other chariot in a second here, but I want to actually read, it's a very small little blurb on the Bloodrack Medusae themselves, because you can have them as a separate unit. They don't have to be on that Bloodrack, on the Bloodrack Shrine. So not all Bloodrack Medusae are goaded to war atop monolithic shrines. Some emerge willingly from their lairs and follow the scent of blood to war. They are unreliable allies who pay no heed to any battle plan, seeking only to share their own torment with their luckless victims. So these guys, again, have that stare and the avert your gaze ability, so they basically are just KOing everything around them, because the avert your gaze ability basically means anything that's engaged in combat with the Bloodrack Shrine or the Medusa has to roll what's called an initiative test. If they fail it, they take a strength 4 hit with killing blow. So I'm not really sure how they're going to deal with a killing blow mechanic in a game that can't really necessarily have a strong killing blow mechanic, and with a unit who derives majority of its usefulness off of a killing blow mechanic, just like the executioners. So they're going to have to do something to balance that out, because otherwise, why not just make a whole army of executioners and run through your entire army? So I'm very curious to see what they do with that, because there's already some units that we've seen in the Warhammer world that have killing blow, and they've done a really good way of incorporating that either into their stats or special rules or items and what have you. So I'm not too worried about them kind of missing the boat on that, because they've been pretty great with everything else so far, as I have constantly said. But let's jump here into the Sisters of Slaughter. These girls are pretty crazy, because like we were saying, there's a bunch of dual kits. Witch elves have the dual kit, and the other end of them, they can be witch elves or they can be Sisters of Slaughter when you put them together. So let's read these guys here, or these girls here, these women here, these sisters here. There are many venues of malign entertainment to be found in Nagaroth, but few are so enthusiastically patronized as gladiatorial arenas. Every city has at least one such amphitheater, where battle is fought to the death for the amusement of a bloodthirsty crowd. Here, amidst the bone-strewn sands, gladiators do battle with traitors, monsters, and hordes of drug-addled slaves. For those warriors who ply this trade as a profession, rather than as a punishment, it is a wild existence, where survival and glory are victory's reward. The Sisters of Slaughter are first among the gladiatorial guilds, the undisputed queens of the arena. Once they numbered merely a dozen, the outcast daughters of a disgraced house who pledged their lives to Eldrazor, Lord of Blades, so that he might look favorably upon their quest for revenge. Now, with their vengeance long ago carved onto the bones of their family's betrayers, the sisters have thousands of experienced fighters spread amongst enclaves in all of the great cities, and a legend that has reached even the shores of distant lands. As for Eldrazor, he is greatly satisfied with the results of his patronage. Ever the half-forgotten outcast of the elven pantheon, his power has grown much with the sisters' rise. The sisters fight as they live, moment to moment, with every gut-spilling swipe and viper-quick slash going unplanned until the second is unleashed. Those who have not seen the Sisters of Slaughter at their quicksilver trade mock their talents, refusing to believe that mere instinct, however finely honed, could replace discipline and training. Such doubts last only until the naysayer witnesses a lone sister hack her way through a trio of captured demons, or sees a handful of gladiatrixes fell a raging chimera with an attack pattern that is as sublimely artistic as it is impossible to predict. Most sisters live their entire lives in the arena, performing bloody deeds of battle for the baying crowds. There comes a time for many, however, when the ritual of arena combat becomes staid and unfulfilling. Thus, a fortunate dreadlord can find himself approached by a band of sisters seeking to test their skills on a real battlefield. Few commanders find it possible to reject such an offer, for the sisters demand no plunder in return for their services, only the promise of a foe that will truly test them. So, it is that many a dark elf raid is headed by gaily laughing warrior women who dance into battle with ferocious grace. Most foes, trained for the battle of regiments and shield walls, are easy prey. The sisters do not slow their approach as the enemy looms, but vault sure-footedly over the locked shields to throw themselves, weapons swinging, into the formation's heart. Moments later, the surviving foes cast down their weapons and flee, their will to fight broken. The Sisters of Slaughter are no longer concerned with them. Eyes glittering with battle joy, they run towards the next foe, eagerly searching for opponents worthy of their skills. So, you have a pretty vicious unit with these ladies, because they have the ability to, they have what's called Dance of Death, which gives them a ward save while they're in close combat. So I wonder if we'll be seeing that as like, okay, we have to get them in close combat quickly, then they get their ward save. And it's interesting to see these guys too, because they're going to be pretty high melee attack, a little bit lower on the armor scale, but with that ward save in close combat, it's going to be able to really, I think, help drive them home, because also they get additional melee attack and melee strength melee attack as if whatever they're fighting is stronger than them. So it'd be cool to see, because you know how if you select a unit and you hover over an opposing unit, you can see what kind of threat value it has to it. So it'd be interesting if the Sisters of Slaughter had a mechanic where it would look at the threat value, and if it was a higher threat value, they'd actually become stronger. That'd be a really, really cool and something very different from all the other armies, to have something that actually you want to be fighting unmatched, to either muck it down or greatly increase its usability on the field. And in general, I'm not a huge fan of Witch Elves, and, well, I'm sorry, I'm a huge fan of Witch Elves, but I'm not a huge fan of the Sisters of Slaughter, because I like more like the armored elf look, and less of like the just screaming banshee she creature trying to destroy everything on the battlefield. It's just less of a predictable unit for me, so I have a hard time using them when I play on the tabletop. But they are definitely a very cool and characteristic unit for the army, and I'm really curious to see how they translate them into Total War Warhammer, because they're gonna, or Total War Warhammer 2, because they're gonna have a lot of really cool abilities in that Dance of Death with that ward save in combat, and that Trial of Blades, which is the name of the ability that increases their effectiveness, their prowess more or less, if they're matched up against something better than them. So I hope they do something with the threat level, because that'd be a really cool change of pace, I guess you could say. So let's get into the last two beasts of Nagaroth here. We'll start off with the Manticores, and then we'll go into the Black Dragons. But the Manticores here, if you haven't noticed, again, the Grecian, this is the last Grecian creature I think we'll find here together, but the Manticores. Dark Elves hold no creature in higher esteem than the Manticore, for they believe it to be one of the 1,000 incarnations of Cain, and daring beastmasters venture as far north as the Chaos Wastes in search of young Manticores to sell at auction. Manticores can be tamed enough to take a rider, though they remain feral. Even if the steed occasionally ignores his commands and pitches him into unfavorable fights, a Dark Elf considers this a minor risk compared to the fear and respect that having such a beast mount brings. So, they have an uncontrollable special rule, which means that they have the ability to just outright ignore their master. And I would be very interested to see if they did that, because I am not 100% sure if they've done that with the feral Manticores, the Beastmen, or the Chaos Manticores of the Chaos armies. I actually just recently started using Beastmen, so I haven't gotten a chance to really dive down that. I tried to do some research before I did this video, and I wasn't too successful in my search, but then again, I was using good old Google. But feel free to let me know if that dynamic is already in the game, because otherwise I don't think that they'll include it for the Dark Elves, because I think it'll be kind of, okay, what's the point of taking a Manticore on the Dark Elves if it's the worst Manticore you can take, or something like that. But again, guys, let me know if that's already in there, and I'm just kind of talking out of my ass on that one, so again, help me. But these guys they're going to be flying. They again have Killing Blow, so I'm interested to see how they translate that. They've got Terror though as well, so it's a pretty cheap mount that's going to give Terror to your Lord, and it'd be great to get that out early on your Dreadlord, so he can start causing some terror. His Blind Rage and Iron Hard Skin abilities help him increase his fighting prowess, as well as his armor in combat too. So I don't really see that happening. I don't really see many of the special upgrades of the units. I don't see that translating into the actual game, unless they did it in a research where, okay, maybe beasts have, maybe it's an Iron Hard Skin will be the name of the research, and all beasts have increased armor for the Dark Elf army. That'd be a really cool thing. I could see that, and maybe the trees themselves will be split across like the different regions of Nagaroth. Like maybe we've got where Karan Kar, where all the Beastmasters are from. Maybe there's a whole tree of Karan Kar that's going to be specific to bonuses for beasts, and their attack for beasts, and leadership for beasts. And maybe we've got stuff from Hairgrave that makes it so that all the stuff with the what's it called, like the Witch Elves and everything are more advantageous, or Harganeth, and maybe it's more armor piercing and the such. I'm not really sure how they're going to do that. I always kind of speculate and wonder how they do the research trees, like what they kind of base things off of. But that would be really cool if they had basically research trees specific to regions, because as you can see, the regions specific dictate pretty much where things are from. Like when we talk about the sorceresses and everything like that, we're actually talking about Grand, and that's also where those Medusae come from as well. So it'd be interesting to see bonuses for that, the Bloodrack Shrine, or bonuses to magic, or other things like that. But that's purely speculative, not really sure on that, and just I think it'd be really kind of cool. But let's get to probably the most important and iconic of beasts for the Dark Elves, the Black Dragons. Dragons once ruled the skies of the world. Now their race is but a shadow of its former power and majesty. When the old ones arrived, the greatest dragons found the world too warm for their liking and hid from the bright sun, while more still stole into caverns and the ocean deeps in the coming of chaos. These massive beasts still slumber, undisturbed by the passing millennia and all but impossible to rouse. Younger dragons, still tremendously powerful monsters, sometimes rise from their deep sleep at the call of the elves, or when other events disturb their aeons-long dreams. Most of these rest in the realm of Calador on Ulthuan, friends to the dragon princes who are descended from the great archmage Caladar Dragon Tamer, ally of Anarion. Like all intelligent creatures, dragons are prone to acts of good or ill depending upon their disposition and the nature of their upbringing. When Malekith first began his plotting to usurp the Phoenix Crown, his agents stole many dragon eggs from their nests in Calador. These were secretly nurtured in Nagarath, and enchanted with dark spells to corrupt the unborn within. The fiercest black dragon from their first clutch was Solkech, a fearsome monster of ferocious power who was slain only by the combined efforts of 3 High Elf princes and Calador the Conqueror. Since Solkech's death at the hands of the High Elves, her children have continued to fight alongside the Dark Elves, seeking vengeance for their ancestor. A black dragon is capable of slaughtering entire armies with its claws, horns, and fangs. With expulsions of noxious gas from its maw, it can wither the lungs of its victims and desiccate their flesh. The thick hide of a black dragon protects it from even the weightiest blows of the enemies. Perhaps the greatest weapon of all is the overwhelming verm dread that fills the enemy upon sighting such a bloodthirsty and destructive monster. So, with the High Elves you get, since the dragon's home is in, well, for the majority of the dragon's home, as we just heard, is in Calador on Ulthuan, they have access to different dragons. You've got your star dragon, your sun dragon, and what was the other one? Was Moon, I believe. And with the Dark Elves, you only have the black dragon. But it does cause terror, just like the High Elves do. It's more akin. It's only got 6 weapon skills, strengths, toughness, and wounds. So it's more akin to. I believe it's the middle of the line dragon. The top one is 7 or 8. I'll have to check that. But the noxious breath is pretty cool because, hey, you guessed it, poison attacks. But it makes it so that the people that it hits actually have reduced melee attack and ranged weapon attack. So that's a pretty cool way to basically jump into the fray, and especially if you're fighting something that's anti-large and you get flanked by it and it uses noxious breath, it's a great way to kind of help mitigate that damage to get the beast out of the fray. So I'm really very curious to see how they incorporate that noxious breath and what kind of negative penalties it's going to have, or if it'll outright just do damage as well, because it does deliver what's considered a strength 4 breath weapon. So everything is in a cone in front of it gets hit for the strength 4 hit. In addition to that, they suffer the debuff. So it'll be really cool to see that mechanic. Now let's round off here the last thing of the Dark Elves in what's called the Cauldron of Blood. And this rounds off who are considered the Brides of Cain, the Witch Elves and the Death Hags. And we'll do the Cauldron of Blood here. Cauldrons of Blood. The Cauldrons of Blood are rumored to be gifts from Cain, who bestowed them upon the Witch Elves as rewards for their single-minded dedication to his cause. At least that was Morathai's claim when she gave the first of these brass cauldrons to the cult of Cain. Each is kept filled with the blood of countless sacrificial victims, though, curiously, it never overflows. The cauldron always maintains the same level, no matter how many gallons of lifeblood are poured into it, as though the very metal of the cauldron thirsts. Each cauldron of blood lies heavy with dark enchantments, and, with proper knowledge, a death hag can access these to unleash the many blessings of Cain. Chief among these is the cauldron's ability to restore youth and vitality to those who bathe within it. As Morathai kept the innermost secrets of the cauldron for herself, all others who utilize this blessing must frequently repeat the bathing process or soon find themselves in their old and withered states once more. In this way, the Hag Sorceress ensures the Hag Sorceress, because that's a specific title from Morathai, The hag sorceress ensures the witch elves' loyalty with the irresistible lure of eternal beauty. The cauldrons of blood are ordinarily kept safely secured within the great temple of Cain, but one is occasionally brought forth when a great host of witch elves marches to battle. Drawn to the cauldron by the prospect of slaughter, the Lord of Murder's baleful spirit goes nearby dark elves to a feverish warlust that will be spent only when there is no longer any blood to spill. So, in the Mortis engine, you kind of get that ability to bolster the undead. In the Cauldron of Blood, you get that ability to give frenzy to all in its range, and it actually increases the frenzy of witch elves and hags and death hags. Hags being the leaders of witch elves, like kind of like sergeants. Think of them that way. But I'm really interested to see if it's called the Fury of Cain, to see if they'll give that to the Cauldron of Blood to help bolster and give fury, or if it'll just help bolster and give melee attack and maybe weapon strength, something like that. Because the Cauldron itself is magic resistant. It's a large target again. It's got poisoned attacks with a favorite boy in the band, and it causes terror. So I'm really stoked to see these things, because you can see these models. They're beautiful centerpieces. They're intimidating as fuck. That's scary. That is scary shit right there. And the Dark Elves themselves have Murderous Prowess, which I was saying they get to re-roll their to wound, which might incorporate maybe an increased attack on a charge or something like that. The Strength of Cain allows you to re-roll again. So you are maybe even on an attack, on a charge, you're even getting more melee attack or something like that. However they want to incorporate that Murderous Prowess rule. So I'm definitely, again, really excited to see these guys in here. They share a kit, as you can assume, with the Bloodrack Shrines. But that pretty much rounds out the rare choices here. The Cauldron of Blood and the Bloodrack being those two kind of cauldron, chariot slash pimp wagons that you see in, like, say, like the Empire armies or the Undead armies. You got your beasts in the Charybdis and Manticore and the Dragon, and you've got your cool little special combat units with Sisters of Slaughter and the Doomfire Warlocks. But that rounds everything out with the Dark Elf army as a whole, and I want to just kind of touch on the two legendary lords that will more than likely, well, one will, like I was saying, absolutely be in it, with Malekith, and Marathai probably being the sorcerer or sorceress lord that we'll see in the Dark Elves. But back on Malekith here, because I want to focus on him first, because he's obviously going to be in, and he's the leader of the Dark Elves. So, Malekith, the Witch King of Naggaroth. The Witch King is the supreme ruler of Naggaroth and the eternal enemy of the High Elves. Long ago, he sought to claim Ulthuan's crown, but the flames of Sirion left him scarred by fire and twisted with hatred. In the years since, Malekith has many times attempted to scour Ulthuan from the face of the earth, but each time has been undone by cruel fate or the incompetence of craven underlings. Yet the Witch King is immortal and knows he will outlast those who foolishly believe themselves his betters. The day is fast approaching where old debts and insults will finally be repaid, and Malekith will do anything within his power to hasten its arrival. So, not a ton of actual lore there to read, and I'm going to be doing, I did a video on the pre-sundering of the High Elves, and so the High Elves when they were unified as, the High Elves, Wood Elves, and Dark Elves that were unified as just the High Elves, or maybe just the Elves, whatever they called themselves at the time. But in the events leading up to the sundering, and eventually the sundering, I'll cover in a video I do in a later time, that'll go into really the history of Malekith and why he is the way he is, and kind of how he tried to supplant and usurp power in Ulthuan. But just to kind of go into some stuff that it leaves kind of guessing here. It's earlier in this book, it describes a lot more about Malekith, so I think at this point the authors are like, well, let's just not beat a dead horse, let's leave a little blurb and move on from there. But Malekith, again, is covered from head to toe, as I've said before, in what is called the Armor of Midnight. To read the little lore thing here, Malekith's rune armor is forged from the hardest meteoric iron and protects against any mortal weapons. His mom, Marathai, made it for him, and Malekith himself is the son of Anarion, who is pretty much the first Phoenix King and the most badass legendary lord of the High Elves. So Anarion and Marathai married after Anarion's first wife, the Everqueen, was killed by demons in an invasion on Ulthuan. Malekith and Marathai then had, I'm sorry, Anarion and Marathai then had Malekith, and Malekith was passed up to be the successor, Phoenix King. And you know, it even describes in the book that he was the first to bend the knee and welcome the successor, Phoenix King, and it goes on from there to basically talk about him undermining the High Elves from within. And he gets a lot of alliances with a lot of other different nations. Like, he is the first ambassador to the dwarves, really, and he learns about the dwarves very intimately, and learns about every little bit of their society. And he learns what causes eventually the War of the Beard, which is after the Sundering, and it causes a big rift between the High Elves and the dwarves, because prior to that, the dwarves and the High Elves worked very, very, very closely together as really the only two elder races, the first two races outside of the Lizardmen to really take sovereignty over Malice, the world of Warhammer. But that's just a little blurb on Malekith, because there wasn't really much there to, I feel like, you know, sate your guys' thirsts. In a lot of the previous editions, he doesn't really have much of a face. It's more like a black opening with glowing eyes coming out of it. In one of the more recent models, he's got like a golden mask on, and they did that too with the actual trailer for Total War Warhammer 2, but also in the past too, some models you actually see him with a face. So there's a bunch of different interpretations of Malekith as the years go on, but the armor has pretty much always stayed the same, with these really ornate, like, horns stemming out from the helmet, and really just an ugly visage on him, and the armor itself really kind of twisted and bladed, just like fitting the majority of the Dark Elf army. That helmet I was talking about is called the Circlet of Iron. The Circlet of Iron is said to be older than the race of elves and is a potent source of magical power, because Malekith himself is a level 4 wizard that knows the lore of dark magic. So kind of like Manfred von Karstein, he knows, like, the lore of death and the lore of vampires. So we'll see another lord here that is going to be a fighty, up close and personal lord on his Black Dragon Seraphon, but he'll also have access to dark magic as well. And he will be immune to psychology. He'll also have eternal hatred and everything like normal Dark Elves do, but that Seraphon is going to be able, it's just simply a black dragon. So that Seraphon's going to be able to cause terror and whatnot. But he also has what's called the Destroyer, and it's a really cool magic weapon that I want to read here real quick. Forged by the Witch King of Naggaroth himself, this blade is a symbol of the Dark Elves' determination to destroy the High Elves and all their works. The Destroyer's merest touch can unmake enchantments or even drain knowledge from the minds of unwary wizards. So it can make wizards forget spells, it can blow up magic items, so it would be really awesome to see that on the battlefield as maybe just a direct counter for some of the more crazy legendary lord weapons. I think it'd be really cool to see it maybe like blow up Isabella von Karstein's Blood Chalice or something like that. Like, it randomly chose a weapon that was on the opposing lord to blow it up, or just negate it for the fight, however they want to do it. Or again, like to nullify a spell, a random spell from a wizard's mind. That'd be a really cool mechanic that we haven't really seen in the game before. So one thing I'm really liking about the High Elves and the Dark Elves, and we'll see with the Lizardmen, and we've already kind of seen with the Skaven, everything, while familiar, has mechanics that are not familiar to anything else. So I mean, the High Elves kind of are going to be very similar to Bretonnia in the sense they're going to have a lot of kits that they can play with and do pretty much everything. And the Skaven too are going to play somewhat similar to the Orcs in the sense they're going to be a horde faction, and the Dark Elves will play. It's really kind of hard to say that they'll play like the High Elves, because they again have a lot more aggression behind all their units. But everything's kind of got its own little flavor to it, and you can see that again with this Destroyer, that makes this legendary lord stand out and make him a little bit more fearful for other legendary lords to engage toe to toe, because his armor makes him pretty tanky. This Destroyer makes him a pretty, worthy foe on the battlefield when it comes to actually attacking things, because he can just blow up what you're using. But and the last thing that Malekith has here is the Supreme Spell Shield, and I wanted to read the little lore blurbs on all these, like I said, because there wasn't so much on him. But the Supreme Spell Shield absorbs magic and then unleashes the energy back at the foe. So if we got some sort of magic reflection capability, that'd be really sick, because it gives him magic resistance. But it'd be cool if maybe it had a chance to reflect the spell, or maybe it always reflected the spell and it was reduced, maybe like a 33% reduction to the spell's potency or something like that. That'd be kind of a nifty mechanic to see. But that rounds off Malekith. There are more lords. There's Helebron or Helebron, I'm not sure how you really pronounce that one, and she's the Blood Queen of Harganeth, which is basically a witch elf legendary lord. There's Shadowblade, who is an assassin legendary lord. Malice Darkblade is another possibility for, especially like a DLC lord. He is the scion of Haggrafe, and he's pretty iconic too, because there's been a lot of books about him. There are books called, you know, Malice, and it's about him in specific. And there's a whole series of them, and he has a lot to do in the end times as well. So I would not be surprised to see him come to the like I said, as a DLC lord, because he's got a really cool a lot of cool special abilities. He's got a Warp Sword of Cain and Zarkhan, which is a special rule of his. But I don't want to get too much into him. If we get it announced, I promise you I'll go into it. But there's also Lokir Felhard, who is basically a special lord for the Corsairs, or Koron Darkhand. So you do have a lot of special lords in the Dark Elves. And you also have Tularis Dreadbringer, who's the Hand of Cain. It's basically a special executioner. But I think the only other legendary lord that we'll see at the start of the game is Marathai, because she is the Hag Sorceress of Grond, so she is another caster special legendary lord, and that kind of would fit the dynamic that we've seen in a lot of the other portions of the Warhammer world, obviously for the exception of dwarves, where you've got mainly a caster lord, and you've got a fighty lord. Like you've got the Fey Enchantress and Leon Leocoeur. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that. And I mean, maybe they do two fighty lords for the Dark Elves, or maybe they do two casty lords. Well, again, can't really do that much, but still. But here's Marathai, the Hag Sorceress of Grond, and our last legendary lord that will close out this portion of our Lorehammer video. Marathai's entire existence has been one of scheming and manipulation. Who knows how many of Anarian's darker deeds sprang from seeds she planted within his mind, or how the history of the elves might have been different if he had not taken her as a wife. Yet for all beautiful Marathai's wiles, she was ultimately spurned by the Phoenix King. Heartbroken, Marathai swore that if her husband could no longer rule the elves, her son would do so in his place. Since that day, Marathai has pursued that goal with supernatural determination. She has spent millennia teaching Malekith all she knows of statecraft and magic, and works tirelessly to maintain his grip on Nagaroth's throne. When the Witch King has faltered, Marathai has always been ready to fan the embers of hatred in his heart. When he has been betrayed, none have fought so hard as to restore his rule. Marathai prefers to work behind the scenes, twisting events to her favor with a carefully chosen alliance or assassination. Yet she is a terrifying force if roused to open conflict, and can unleash the horrific power of chaos with barely a thought. She is capable of the most destructive magics possible, and there is little doubt that if Malekith is ever slain, she will use that knowledge to see the world destroyed rather than endure in the hands of another. So she is a very, very, very old character, in the sense that she's been around since pretty much the dawn of the elves. Well, not necessarily the dawn of the elves, but Anarian, which is the very first Phoenix King. So she's been around for millennia. She's a very powerful wizard, but she only actually has access to Death, Shadow, and the Lore of Dark. She's got the ability to choose from all of them, not just one, so she can generate all of her spells from the same lore, or from two or more of the above lores in any combination. So I'm wondering if we're going to be seeing something kind of like Manny, where he can take spells, whichever he chooses as he levels up, from Death and from Vampires, if she'll be able to choose Death, Lore, and Dark. Death, Shadow, and Dark. But she's mounted on a Dark Pegasus, Sulafet, and that thing will of course be flying as well, so she'll be able to fly. And it has all Dark Pegasus have which I didn't really go into much here. Let me read this bit on the Dark Pegasi. They make their nests on the northernmost peaks of the Iron Mountains. It is from these eyries that the Dark Elves steal young Pegasi to serve as steeds. A fully grown beast is too savage to be trained. The majority of these young Dark Pegasi are sold in Grand. For such beasts are favored as steeds by the sorceresses of the Dark Covenant. So they have the ability to, they can impale attack. So it basically just makes their attack stronger for a set period of time. I'm sorry, that's what I would see it in Total War Warhammer. It just makes their strength more, but maybe it gives them armor piercing for a certain portion of time, or a stronger charge. It'd be really cool for the Blood for Blood God DLC, how it adds blood, but just to see like a Dark Pegasus just skewer something in his chest. Just Steve Irwin it. But she's got a lot of cool special abilities because she is the first sorceress, so she's got more bonuses for casting. She's got this really cool thing called Heartrender and the Dark Swords. The Dark Sword. The Heartrender's blade is a wicked thing, laden with vile enchantments to seek an opponent's heart. The Dark Sword, too, is bewitched, but with spells of blinding and enfeeblement that sap a foe of his strength, even if it survives the blows. So it's a paired weapon, and hits from it actually have, again, killing blow that would make her stronger, and in addition to that, it can actually reduce the attack strength and toughness of something. So I could definitely see this being a weapon that debuffs melee attack, and it debuffs maybe melee defense, as well as maybe even weapon strength if we're doing the actual strength of the model itself. So you definitely get some really cool abilities in her, because she has the ability to, she has like this, it's called Enchanting Beauty. And what it does is anything that's in close combat with her suffers a penalty to their weapon skill, which is, again, translates to Total War Warhammer as melee attack. So if things in her radius, kind of like the Fey Enchantress gets that radius bonus, if she kind of got that radius bonus where it would make it so things got a negative to their melee attack. Because as you can see from the Dark Elves, they're all about boosting their melee attack and negating other people's melee attack, or making it so they're less effective at actual combat and less so maybe at their armor, or less so at their toughness themselves. So it's very clear cut. That's how their kind of dynamic works. And she, on top of it, has a ward save and magic resistance. But that kind of rounds out our legendary lords here, Morathai and Malekith. You know, the mother-son dynamic here being probably the capital legendary lords. And you can see her naked on a Pegasus, which is, Pegasus are kind of horny. If you get what I'm throwing out there, you're putting what I'm putting down, picking up what I'm throwing around. But I think that you guys are really going to enjoy what they do with the Dark Elves. I'm really excited to see how this all fleshes out. We'll be doing another lore video here with the Lizardmen. I'd like to do one with the Lores of Magic. If that interests you guys, just let me know. And thanks for bearing with me on the hellish allergies that I'm getting around here in Southern California. It does make for me kind of clear my throat and sneeze a little bit in these Lorehammer videos, but I try to keep it to a minimal as much as possible. But thanks for joining me today, guys. Always appreciate your comments and any kind of clarifications of anything in the lore that you guys kind of already know or know from previous editions. For the most part, these are kind of stream of consciousness for me. I'm reading and kind of and riffing off of it, so please feel free to fill in any of the blanks that you see. I always love the community kind of jumping in on this, and I always make corrections as you guys see it. So again, thanks for joining, guys. Be on the lookout for some more coming up, and let me know if you want to see that lore of the lores video. I'd love to make it for y'all. Have a good one, guys. Take care. After I finished this encore, I completely forgot about the Black Ark Fleet Masters, and I couldn't in good conscience leave them out, as they are just kind of another thematic lord that fills in with the Black Ark Corsairs. So you've got the High Elves with their Lothern Sea Guard and their Lothern Sea Captains. You've got your Dark Elves with your Black Ark Corsairs, as well as your Black Ark Fleet Masters. And this isn't a very big portion, but it's just a small little bit that I know if I left out, some of you that really like the Black Ark Corsairs like I do would have felt that sting. So I want to definitely get them in here real quick for you. It takes decades of hard-bitten villainy to earn or usurp command of a mighty Black Ark and its attendant fleet. Little wonder is it then that the Black Ark Fleet Masters are amongst the most intemperate and ruthless of their race, and must always have one eye on their loyal warriors. Now, the Fleet Masters, well, the Black Arks in general, are the giant raiding fleets of the Dark Elves. They ravage the coasts of Ulthuan, they go down to Lustria, sometimes they peek over into Britannia. That's not very common, by the way, but that does happen. They go everywhere and raid from everything. And the Black Ark is the name of the ship itself. So that, if you're wondering where that comes from, because we heard that in the Corsairs, and we're hearing that now in the Fleet Masters, that's the origin, I guess you could say, of that word. But these characters themselves are meant to be more like duelists. They are just like the Corsairs. They've got their Sea Dragon cloak. They use two-hand weapons. They can take magic items. But they've got a cool special rule called Show No Weakness. That means that if they win a challenge or kill an enemy character, the entire unit it's with gets unbreakable. So it'd be really interesting if they did that mechanic in Total War Warhammer 2 of including something where, okay, if he's in the radius of a lord that gets killed, or maybe it's an activatable ability in the in vicinity of a lord that makes everything around him unbreakable, or maybe the entire map unbreakable, kind of like a Grombrandal's ability with the White Dwarf, and makes his army unbreakable for a short duration of time. That'd be kind of a really awesome mechanic to see here with the Fleet Masters. But just wanted to drop that in here real quick before we close this episode out. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have a good one and take care. Bye.